The wind howled across the endless plains, carrying with it the scent of dust, dry grass, and something unfamiliar, something that did not belong to the world Karo had always known. Karo was young, but not a child anymore. His tribe had begun to trust him with small hunts, and he had learned how to read the land, the broken twig that spoke of passing animals, the distant cry that warned of predators, the shifting sky that foretold storms. Survival was not taught with words. It was carved into the bones through fear, hunger, and instinct. That morning, the tribe had moved toward a rocky valley in search of water. The rivers had begun to shrink, and the elders whispered that the land itself was changing. Karo walked behind the others, gripping his sharpened spear, his eyes wandering beyond the familiar trail. That was when he saw it. Far beyond the valley, past the jagged stones and blackened earth, there was a strange glow. It flickered faintly even under the bright sun, like fire, but it was not fire. It did not smoke, and it did not fade. Karo stopped, his heart beat faster. The world he knew had rules. Fire burned, water flowed, the sky stayed above, but this glow seemed to break those rules. A voice inside him, older than thought, told him to turn away. But curiosity, just as powerful, pulled him forward. That night, while the tribe slept near a shallow pool, Karo stayed awake. The moon rose high, casting pale light over the land. He could still see the faint glow in the distance. He made his choice. Silently, he stood, took his spear, and slipped away into the darkness. The journey was long and filled with danger. The land grew rougher the farther he walked. Sharp rocks cut into his feet. Strange sounds echoed through the night, calls of creatures he had never heard before. At one point, glowing eyes appeared in the darkness behind him. A predator. Karo froze, gripping his spear tightly. The creature circled, low and silent. Karo remembered what the hunters had taught him. Do not run. Do not show fear. With a sudden roar, he charged forward, thrusting his spear into the darkness. The creature screeched and fled, disappearing into the night. Karo stood there, breathing heavily, his body shaking, but alive. He continued. As dawn approached, the air began to feel different. Warmer, heavier. The ground beneath his feet changed from dry dust to a smooth, dark surface that felt almost unnatural. And then, he reached it. The glow. Karo stepped forward slowly, his eyes wide. Before him stood something no human had ever seen. It was a structure, tall, smooth, and shining faintly with a soft blue light. It had no rough edges, no cracks, no signs of age. It looked as if it had been placed there by forces beyond nature itself. Karo circled it, his breath shallow. He touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, the light pulsed. Karo jumped back, fear surging through him. But nothing attacked, nothing moved. Instead, the surface of the structure began to shift. A low hum filled the air, deep and powerful, like the growl of the earth itself. The smooth wall opened slowly, revealing darkness inside. Karo's instinct screamed at him to run. But again, curiosity won. He stepped inside. The air within was cool and carried a strange scent, clean, almost too clean. The walls glowed faintly, lighting his path without fire. Karo walked deeper. Symbols appeared on the walls, shapes and patterns he could not understand. They seemed alive, moving slightly as he passed, as if reacting to him. Suddenly, the ground beneath him vibrated. Karo dropped into a defensive stance, his spear ready. The humming grew louder, and the light intensified. Then, in front of him, something appeared. It was not a creature, not like any animal he had ever known. It had no fur, no scales, no visible eyes. It was made of light, shifting and flowing like water, yet holding a shape. Karo stared, frozen. The being moved closer. Fear gripped him, but he did not run. The being stopped just a few steps away. It did not attack. Instead, it extended something like an arm, made entirely of glowing energy. Karo hesitated. Slowly, he lowered his spear. He reached out. Their forms touched. In that instant, Karo's mind exploded with images. He saw vast lands far beyond his own, forests taller than mountains, oceans stretching endlessly, skies filled with stars he had never imagined. He saw creatures that did not exist in his world, and others that had yet to be born. He saw fire being controlled, tools becoming weapons, tribes becoming villages, villages becoming cities. He saw humans. He saw their future. Karo cried out, collapsing to the ground as the visions overwhelmed him. When it stopped, he lay there, breathing heavily, his entire body trembling. The being of light stood silently. Karo looked at his hands. They were the same, but he was not. Something inside him had changed. He understood things he never had before. Not in words, but in feeling. In instinct. He stood slowly. The being began to fade. Karo reached out, as if to stop it, but it was already disappearing, its light dissolving into the walls. The humming faded. The structure grew quiet. Karo was alone again. He stumbled out of the structure as the sun rose over the horizon. The glow began to dim, as if the strange place was returning to sleep. Karo looked back one last time. Then he turned and began the long journey home. When he returned to the tribe, they were searching for him. Some were angry, others were relieved. The elder approached him, studying his face. Karo said nothing. How could he explain what he had seen? Days passed, life continued, but Karo was no longer the same hunter. He began to do things differently. He shaped tools with more precision. He used fire more carefully. He taught others to observe, to think, to plan. At first, the tribe resisted. But slowly, they began to follow. Hunts became more successful. Shelters became stronger. The tribe grew safer. The elder watched closely. One night, under a sky full of stars, the elder sat beside Karo. "You went far," the elder said quietly. Karo nodded. "You saw something." Karo hesitated, then nodded again. The elder looked up at the sky. "The world is bigger than we know," he said. Karo followed his gaze. For the first time, he did not just see stars. He felt them. Seasons passed. The land changed. The tribe moved, survived, and grew. Karo became a leader, not because he was the strongest, but because he understood something others did not. The memory of the glowing structure never left him. Sometimes, at night, he would walk away from the tribe and look toward the distant valley. But he never returned. Some part of him knew that what he had experienced was not meant to be repeated. It was a beginning. Years later, as Karo grew older, he told stories to the younger ones. Not of glowing structures or beings of light, but of thinking, of learning, of becoming more than what they were. The children listened, their eyes wide, and though they did not know it, something had already changed within them too. Far beyond the understanding of early humans, something had reached out across time and space, and touched a single life. And through that one life, the future had begun to take shape. The wind still howled across the plains. The land was still harsh. But now, there was something new in the world. Not just survival, but awareness. And Karo, the young hunter who followed a strange glow into the unknown, had become the first to carry it. The first to glimpse a life not of this world, and bring back a spark that would one day change everything. The years passed like drifting dust across the endless plains, but the change that had begun within Karo did not fade. It grew stronger, deeper, and more mysterious with time. The tribe no longer saw him as just a hunter. He had become something more, something they could not fully understand. Some whispered that the spirits of the sky had touched him. Others believed he had walked into a forbidden place and returned with hidden power. But no one could deny the truth. Under Karo's guidance, the tribe survived better than ever before. Food became more reliable. Karo taught them to set traps instead of always chasing prey. He showed them how to shape stones into sharper, more effective tools. He even began marking symbols on rocks, simple lines and shapes that carried meaning. At first, the tribe thought it was strange. But slowly, they began to learn. A circle meant water nearby. 3 sharp lines meant danger. A curved shape meant animals passed through recently. It was not language, not yet, but it was the beginning of something powerful. Karo often sat alone at night, staring into the fire. The flames reminded him of the glowing structure, of the being made of light. He could still feel the echo of that moment in his mind, the flood of visions, the overwhelming sense of something far greater than himself. And sometimes, he dreamed. In his dreams, he stood once again inside that strange place. But now, it was different. The walls moved more clearly, the symbols glowed brighter, and the being of light seemed closer, almost as if it was trying to speak. One night, the dream changed. Karo saw the plains, but they were no longer empty. Strange shapes moved across them. Creatures made of metal, faster than any animal. The sky was filled with fire and thunder. And humans, his kind, stood together, stronger, smarter, but also, divided. He woke up suddenly, breathing hard. The fire beside him had nearly died. Karo looked around at his sleeping tribe. Peaceful, safe. But something deep inside him told him that the future he had seen was not just a dream. It was a warning. The next morning, Karo called the tribe together. This was unusual, only the elder usually did that. The people gathered, murmuring quietly. Karo stood before them, holding a long, carefully shaped spear. "We must move," he said. The tribe looked confused. There was water nearby. Food was still available. Why leave? The elder stepped forward. His eyes were calm, but questioning. "Why?" he asked. Karo paused. How could he explain a feeling? A vision. "The land will change," Karo said finally. "Danger is coming." Some of the hunters frowned. They did not trust feelings. They trusted what they could see, hear, and touch. But the elder studied Karo carefully. Then, slowly, he nodded. "We move," the elder declared. There were protests, but none dared to disobey. The tribe began their journey that same day. They traveled for many days, moving farther than they ever had before. The land became greener, richer. There were rivers that flowed stronger, trees that offered shade, and animals that were easier to hunt. It seemed Karo had been right. But the real reason came later. One evening, as the tribe rested on a hill, they saw smoke rising in the distance, thick, dark, and endless. Karo climbed higher, his heart pounding. What he saw made his breath stop. The valley they had left behind was burning. A massive fire had spread across the land, devouring everything in its path. Trees, grass, animals, nothing was spared. The tribe stood in silence, watching from afar. If they had stayed, they would have been gone. The people turned to Karo with new eyes, not just respect, but awe. From that day on, no one questioned him again. But Karo did not feel powerful. He felt afraid, because he did not understand how he knew. Days turned into seasons, and seasons into years. The tribe grew larger, stronger. They began to settle for longer periods, building more stable shelters using wood, stone, and animal skins. Karo encouraged them to stay together, to share knowledge, to teach the young not just how to hunt, but how to think. He often gathered the children and showed them the symbols he had created. He taught them how to observe the stars, how to predict weather, how to notice patterns in the world around them. "You must see," he would say, tapping his head. "Not just with eyes, but hear." The children listened more than the adults ever had. One boy, named Reka, stood out. He was curious, always asking questions, always watching Karo closely. One night, Reka approached him. "You see things others don't," the boy said. Karo smiled slightly. "I saw something once," he replied. "What?" Reka asked eagerly. Karo looked at the sky. "Something not from this world." Reka's eyes widened. "Will I see it too?" Karo was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe. But you must be ready." Years later, Karo grew old. His hair turned gray, his movements slower. But his mind remained sharp, filled with knowledge and memories no one else possessed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Karo felt something he had not felt in many years. The pull, the same strange feeling that had led him to the glowing structure long ago. He stood slowly, his body weak but determined. Without telling anyone, he began to walk. Step by step, he moved away from the tribe, toward the distant lands he had once explored as a young hunter. It took him many days. His body struggled, but something guided him forward. And then, at last, he saw it, the valley, but it was no longer burned or empty. The land had healed, grass had grown again, life had returned, and in the center, the glow, faint, but unmistakable. Karo's heart pounded. He approached slowly, just as he had all those years ago. The structure was still there. Waiting, he stepped closer. This time, there was no fear, only understanding. As his hand touched the surface, the light pulsed once more. The entrance opened. Karo smiled, and stepped inside. The walls lit up brighter than before, recognizing him. The humming returned, deeper, more powerful. And then, the being of light appeared again. But this time, it felt different. Familiar, as if it had been waiting. Karo stood tall, despite his age. "I came back," he said softly. The being moved closer, and once again, it reached out. When they touched, the visions returned, but clearer, stronger. Karo saw everything, not just fragments, the full path of humanity. From simple hunters, to builders of worlds. From fire, to stars. He saw cities rise, and fall. He saw knowledge grow beyond imagination. He saw humans leave the earth itself, reaching into the vast unknown. And he understood. This was not just a gift. It was a responsibility. When the vision ended, Karo fell to his knees. He was weak now. His time was near. The being of light surrounded him, its glow soft and calm. Karo looked up one last time. "My people," he whispered. The light pulsed gently, and in that moment, Karo felt peace. He had done what he was meant to do. The spark had been passed on. Outside, the wind moved quietly across the plains. Inside the glowing structure, the light slowly faded. And Karo, the hunter who had once followed curiosity into the unknown, became part of something far greater than himself. Back in the tribe, young Reka stood under the night sky, staring at the stars just as Karo once had. He felt something, a pull, a question, a beginning, and far away, beyond understanding, the cycle continued. Because the story of humanity was only just beginning.